Hey, greetings, everyone. My name is Sarah Zeller-Berkman, and I'm the Academic Director of Youth Studies Programs at CUNY SPS. And I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Denice Williams, who is the Deputy Commissioner of Planning, Program Integration, and Evaluation at New York City's Department of Youth and Community Development, who is the first in our Lunch with Leaders series. And in Denice's current role, she works with DYCD leadership to improve the agency's use of data in decision-making. She refines its processes and works to enhance intra and inter-agency partnerships and really use DYCD's convening power in the service of youth, families, and communities. And, you know, I could tell you about the myriad of accolades that Denice has garnered as she came to the position where she is at this moment, but we only have half an hour. But I am just going to say one thing, that every time I leave a meeting with Denice, I leave fired up and feeling like, you know, we can change the world. So we're going to go through a series of questions today that will get at hopefully kind of where Denice's own fire and passions came from, and get a glimpse about what DYCD is currently doing to try to make those passions become a reality, and kind of where we're at in the city in relation to making this a better place for children and their families. Okay, so Denice, can you tell our audience a bit about your own journey to your current position here at DYCD, any passions that have guided you, et cetera?
So first, I'm excited to be kicking this off. I'm really proud to be part of this series, and we'll be sure to listen to whomever comes after me. But so I'm a lifelong New Yorker, born in Brooklyn and raised in Queens, public schools, the whole 9 yards. First person in my family to graduate from college. I think that you all don't know this, but I'm kind of a Law and Order fan. So if you look at old Law and Order episodes, you'll see what New York really was like during the time that was kind of pivotal for me. I grew up during the crack epidemic, and like I said, I lived in Queens, and there were kind of projects, and if I said them now, you'd know what we were talking about. But it was during that time that I started thinking I wanted to do stuff for my community. And at the time I was in at Pace, but I was an English major because I'm also a diehard sports fan. Unfortunately, I root for all the losing teams, but I was a sports fan, and I was at Pace, and I'm thinking I want to do something for my community. And when I graduated, I started a job in Queens, and it was called the Consortium of Queens Art Service Organizations. It wasn't exactly on point, and I actually didn't know anything about the nonprofit sector. But the great thing about that was it kind of introduced me to this concept of art bringing life and light to community. And it also started me on this path of knowing that even in times of intense darkness or crises in the city of New York, there are people doing amazing things. And so I was never as depressed as everybody else who was reading the paper, because I could go in any neighborhood. The time Bushwick, where everybody wants to live now, wasn't so great. But, Bushwick, South Jamaica, whatever, and say, here's a leader who's doing something in this neighborhood that was great. But really, I started out wanting to be a sports writer. So one thing you should take from this is you really need to know how to write well. That has served me really well in this career. But I started out there and then just followed this interest in giving back to community and kept doing different things. But it started out in the arts. And then I found my way, because I said to myself, I need to do other things than the arts for my community. And I took a job for less money and a title as secretary. So I'm just saying, your path is not always straightforward. It's not linear. So I took a job as secretary to 2 program officers at the New York Community Trust. Amazing opportunity, because it introduced me to the nonprofit sector as a whole in the city of New York. And I got introduced, I had a fabulous boss, one of the two was fabulous, so you don't always get fabulous. But I had a fabulous boss who's still a friend of mine today, and she introduced me to leaders in youth development. And I'm going to say names, and I hope you know some of them, but I met, God bless him, John Best, who founded the Valley, a major nonprofit in the city of New York. He's since passed, but Alfonso Wyatt, who is still doing great things and refers to himself as an elder, but he was at the Valley and has done other things, and frankly, it helped me along my journey. Moises Perez, folks that are at El Puente, you know, a lot of the folks who have moved the field of youth development, I got introduced to them just by tagging along with my boss on site visits. But technically I was a secretary, and that's the other thing I would say, never let your title define you, because I was her secretary, but I didn't behave as such, and I was always curious and interested in what she was doing and why we made the grants, and she was also very interested in sharing. So that was a great job for me, although at the time my family thought I was crazy. And my mother said to me, you could have been a secretary out of high school. You paid all that money to go to college, and then you wind up being a secretary. But that job was important to putting me on a track, because then I applied for an internship at Community Resource Exchange, which is one of the largest nonprofit management consulting groups. And the only reason I knew about that, because my favorite boss, who I'll say is Holly Delaney Cole, I'll give a shout out to her. You can have mentors your whole life. She's been a mentor of mine for like 30 years now, I guess. But she was leaving to move to Chicago. And I said to her, and we were both at the New York Community Trust, if you're leaving, I'm leaving. I'm not staying here with these people. And she said, well, if you're serious, I have this opportunity came across my desk, and it was to be an intern, which I know sounds crazy, to CRE, and that was funded by the Aaron Diamond Foundation. And the whole purpose of that was to train people of color to be management consultants. Even today, the field of management consulting and evaluation is not very diverse, I would say. And my boss, another shout out at the time, Fran Barrett, who's kind of a legend in nonprofit stuff in the city, went to Aaron Diamond Foundation and got money for this internship. And what I'll say was important, and she recognized, is that people of color could not be interns for free. Like, we needed money, we needed health insurance. You know, I mentioned I was an English major in journalism, and I remember wanting to, in the summer, take internships at ESPN and all those other things, and I could never do that. I used to have to work during the summer to, you know, make money to get through school. So all these other colleagues and students of mine got to do those things, and I never did. But Fran recognized that, and she went to them for a paid internship. And I was the first person of color to, after the internship, stay on as a consultant for CRE. And I wound up staying there 16 years and left there as the number 2 person. So I just want you to take for that. Sometimes you got to step out on faith, follow your path. Don't look at the title. Look at what opportunities to learn, an introduction to a new sector. Path will not always be forward thinking from the point of view of other people.
Thank you. Okay, I mean, you talked a little bit about your passion always to make community change, and can you tell me a little bit more, like, what were some of the other guiding passions for you, or your theory of how change would happen for young people or for communities?
I have a theory now, but I'm 55.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't have a theory.
Right. Okay,
I just wanted to get involved. But now, especially, you know, I have an 18-year-old now, and we're living in interesting times. And one of my favorite plays is Hamilton. And I've said this to you, but one of the things I've said to my daughter was, the people who founded this country were like 19, 20, 21, right? amazingly bright, courageous. I never say fearless because that's silly. We all have fear. But being courageous is stepping out even when you have fear. And why I say that to her is because that's what we all need to do. The young people are the ones that are going to make change. And it's our job to help them see that potential and develop those skills and then get out of the way. Because the older you get, the more fear you have. Fear of loss. You fear, the bad things that can happen. You also have responsibilities for others. So you're like, even now, they call it the golden handcuffs. Can I step away from my job? I have rent to pay. I have these other things to pay. And so I feel like, our responsibilities, and not just people my age, just people a little older than them, is to pass on the information and also to bring them up behind you. But I do really mean get out of the way, because they will generate the new ideas and the new thoughts. And that Einstein said, insanity is doing the same thing, expecting different results. We as adults tend to do that. And so I think them catalyzing the ideas, but with support and competencies. I really, as a woman of color, it always offends me when we're tokenized, right? When we have to be at the table and they're not really sure we're going to contribute. I'm putting that in quotes. And I feel like we do that with young people as well. So do not put them in a place where they're not prepared to succeed and really participate, because especially if you're a person of color, we should not then turn around and tokenize other communities. And so I've always been into the possibilities and the energy for the possibilities. And as I've gotten older, I feel like my responsibility more is to help create paths and to help develop young people, but also to raise their horizons. And I think that's the responsibility of all adults. So specific to DYCD, and we're government, so it's a little odd for government wanting to be leading a revolution, right? Because we're kind of part of the problem, and that's very true. But we have been focused on, in all of our programs, youth leadership development, and helping them get the competencies that are based in SEL, right? Self-awareness, awareness of others around you, how to work with others, but other things like assessment, like reading things, how to decipher really critical thinking of all this information that's being thrown at you. When you have a president that's talking about fake news, right? What does that mean? That you should read lots of different things and get different perspectives and question everybody, even your professors. Question everybody. That was my great aha. And it didn't happen for me when I was in college. It happens to me as a parent, right? Understanding that the teachers don't know everything and that they have biases. You really get that when it's your own kid you're fighting for, but really sharing that with young people. And so DYCD's role in that is kind of imbuing leadership development in what we're doing. And now the additional part is we're looking to our beacons and cornerstones, which are our community centers, to be hubs of activity and really encouraging them to engage the community in planning. So inside out, not just sitting around waiting for people to show up at the door, but really being focused on what's happening around them. And then my own personal bias is organizing. I wish we could fund it. We don't, but a shout out to the New York Foundation. I think organizing is the key to everything, because it helps communities understand their role and their power, and it helps them build skills. And no one, even God bless our current administration, who's done more than anyone around human services. But if you think about the Obama administration, it didn't get as far as it could have. And I say partly our responsibility, because we didn't organize and we thought, oh, he's there now. But he needed to be pushed, and we needed to show up as communities to show the other communities, like the Tea Party and whatever, that we were here and to be reckoned with. And I think we need to continue to do that. So that's not my role right now, but I would say organizing and services to help young people develop competencies, and then giving them the support they need to make the change that we need them to make on behalf of us all.
Yeah. I mean, that's an amazing example about how your own commitments and passion, you are able to bring that into kind of systems level ways of making sure that young people can participate in issues that impact their lives. But have you hit any barriers or walls? And if you did, trying to make that happen, like how were you able to persevere?
We all hit barriers. I mean, you know, I just mentioned organizing. So one thing is looking at where you sit and what's appropriate for your role, right? So I am not organizing or doing that kind of work, but I support it in my, you know, private life and in my donations and all that. But I do think that you hit roadblocks in any structure you're in. And I happen to be in a big bureaucracy, right? A school can be a bureaucracy. You can be in a nonprofit and it can be a bureaucracy. So I would say that if you're in school now, one skill set that you have to master is managing up, managing laterally. One thing that I've learned coming to DYCD, I'm now in a place where it's like 600 staff. And prior to that, my largest organization was 40. And so how do you manage laterally and influence people who don't report to you or work for you is a new skill set that I've had to develop since I've gotten here. And so I would say continuing mastery around that. Things don't go as fast as you want.
Right. Change takes time. When you're doing like massive level
change takes time. We are funding thousands of nonprofits who all have very different missions and competencies, right, and beliefs. And so I think looking for leverage points and having patience. And I think the thing for me, how I've dealt with it is, you know, I used to oversee capacity building for DYCD, and I recognized that we were going to have to build capacity both of DYCD staff as well as those we fund before we could move forward in the change. And so some of the vision that I had about 10 years ago is just manifesting now, but you had to build the foundation. And so there is kind of this patience that you have to have, but it was a huge lift. But I will say DYCD, some of the things we're doing now, we would not have been able to do without I hadn't done the groundwork over the last 5 or 6 years.
And can you tell me a little bit more about DYCD's current priority areas? Because I know that youth leadership, you've pushed out hard. Like, what are other things that you want our people to know about what DYCD is doing right now?
So you know, one thing I want you to understand, DYCD is funds lots of things beyond after school. Most folks don't know that, but we do fund programs for seniors and healthy families and immigrant services. And so one huge priority, and our budget is bigger than it's ever been for our commissioner, is making folks aware and acting more in a holistic manner. So for example, if you are a young person and you are in our middle school program, we want you to know the pathways and all of the other things that you can have access to that are at no cost. And I don't say free because it costs the city, but at no cost to you or your family. And we haven't done a good job of that, including not just things we fund, but connecting you to other things the city is doing. Very proud of the investment in mental health services. Young people are under a great deal of stress, especially young people of color, young people from immigrant families who are under attack, enormous pressure. So we need to, our jobs as program directors or as DYCD staff, not just to be aware of what we do, what we fund and only care about that, but what else does families need. So for DYCD, it's not about getting bigger, but by taking a more holistic view. So for example, when all of this stuff really started happening the day after Election Day with our president, really pushing out information to our after-school programs for young people about your rights, like partnering with the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs so that they knew their rights, talking to our program directors about, you know, the fact that ICE is now allowed in our schools. That includes our after-school programs, but we wouldn't have been doing that before. So like I'm really proud with this commissioner that we've lifted our heads up and have really engaged and understood how the political climate context is impacting, you know, who we want to serve, and that we have responsibility to get involved with that, which doesn't necessarily mean us funding things, but really being proactive. What are your rights? You know, how can we help and assist you in what is going on? And so I think I'm most proud of that about DYCD and pushing that out into our communities, particularly our Cornerstones and Beacon programs. And, you know, we are developing new systems that will facilitate referrals so that our program directors don't have to, you know, memorize everything we fund, but that we can push out information to a parent that says, oh, I see your kid is graduating from middle school. Did you know they're eligible for our summer youth employment program? And here's the application. And we're going online. So parents can apply without getting paper and showing up at a school. And not only that, we're having our Cornerstones be welcome centers. So if you can't do it on your phone, because you don't have a phone, show up at our Cornerstone and they will help you apply for things. So we're really focused on equity, and equity means really figuring out access and not just being happy with that, 70,000 young people got SYP, but who's not getting it? And, you know, when we heard from our transgender young people that they aren't even applying because they've had really bad experiences with some of our work sites, we're now working on that. So it's not just the numbers, which I'm most proud of. Like, you could just pat yourself on the back that we have the largest summer youth employment program in the country and the largest in our history. We went behind those numbers to ask those questions, right? And so I think using data to inform what we do, but also looking behind that to do focus groups and to talk to folks. First time in our needs assessment, we had a youth survey. Never did that in the history of this agency. And so young people told us what they wanted and what they thought. And so I think use that and to ask those questions, right? So I'm most proud of that, I think. Yeah.
I want to, so you gave a bit of a sense about how this larger sociopolitical context has impacted what you at DYCD are doing or prioritizing or just emphasizing. This is more about the field. Before I ask this question, I want you as an audience, you can send in your questions for Denice. Just want to make sure that you know to do that. Okay, so just send in any of your questions too. Okay, well, as we're waiting in for any questions from the audience, this is more about the field of youth development. Are there any things that you think kind of as a field we need to shift or think about when you have a broader context that's really having people under attack, and you know, what are some of the ways in which our field may need to shift?
I think one big thing for me, and this is for all of us, not just youth development, but in nonprofits, we have to be aware of our own biases. And there's kind of a, you know, good intentions doesn't always turn into what we want. And I'm kind of really aware of this now, even doing a lot of the work with the LGBT. Like, I hear stuff from people who are in the field about their own belief sets. And, you know, I'm a Christian as well. However, right? We have rules in New York and laws, and we need to know what we bring to our job and what we're supposed to do. And so I just want us to be more introspective as we do this work. Just because we're doing this work and we show up doesn't mean we're doing it well. So just continuous reflection individually, but also as nonprofits and programs. We're in a good place in New York right now because this mayor believes in what we do, but I also feel like we need to figure out and be able to speak more succinctly about what we deliver on behalf of young people, and be okay with that. Like I'm definitely not one talking about grades,
Right.
but we can talk about competencies, right? And skills we're helping them develop. And how do we know that, right? And how are we being intentional about that? And, you know, about 90% of DYCD's youth development programs are in schools. And I get the feedback from principals that suggests to me we're not really good at marketing and communicating to our audiences just by virtue of what they say to me. They say things to me like, are these people, in quotes, trained? And do they use curriculum? And what are they supposed to be doing? So we're not even, you're not sharing, first of all, who you are and how well trained you are and all the professional development that you and your staff take advantage of, and the value add and what you're contributing to the schools. And I say we have a moment in time to develop that now because this mayor actually just believes in it. But we, you know, in a few short years, we could be in another space. So I would encourage us not to rest on that, but to think about, and frankly, that is what we are trying to do. Because if you ever heard my commissioner speak, we talk about how DYCD is a nice to have, not a must have. Nothing we fund is a mandated service in the city of New York, right? Mandated, like Department of Education or ACS or anything like that. And so when the bad times come, and they will, we are the first to go. And so all of these beacons and cornerstones and sonic programs and conference and all of the things that we are all so proud to be working in will be the first on the chopping block. And I've been here at DYCD since 2005. So I've lived through 12 rounds of cuts and had to make a few of my own. So what I'm saying is we have to always be talking about what is our added value so that we aren't always first in line. And we always have to talk about quality, right? We've grown so fast, we have to focus on quality now, what we are doing, so that we can show people that parents and principals and other stakeholders that we are contributing to the city of New York by developing this next group of leaders. And, you know, I'm really proud of the work we do. So I talk about it all the time, and I'll encourage you all to do that. Encourage your parents to be talking about it. Encourage the young people in the programs to understand where the money comes from. In fact, I'll end on that, especially middle and high school. They should understand how government operates. They should understand that these programs that they enjoy don't just show up. They should understand why it's going to be important for them to vote if they're 18 on the 11th. My daughter's first time voting, and saying to her, you're working, you had SYP this year, right? And you're working in after school. You like that? You want that to continue to happen? Then show up. And that's important. And if they're not old enough to vote, to make sure their parents are going out to vote. But they won't know that unless you understand how you get funded and how the system works, and passes that on to them and your families. But let's spread that information so that we're our best advocates, but so are they.
Thank you, Denice. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today. at lunch. Thank you guys for having lunch with us, and you really set this series off in a powerful way. Thank you.
My pleasure.